With all due respect, ma'am, this is a Naval War College simulation. It requires an understanding of fleet dynamics, not just whatever it is you did before becoming a consultant. The words spoken by Lieutenant Commander Davies dripped with a unique blend of academic arrogance and youthful condescension. He was sharp, a recent Annapolis Star graduate, and he carried his rank not as a responsibility, but as a weapon. The crowd of assembled officers, a mix of junior lieutenants and seasoned commanders, shifted uncomfortably. A few of the younger ones, those still orbiting Davies's bright, self-important star, offered a few nervous, sycophantic chuckles. The laughter echoed for a moment in the cavernous, chilled room of the Wargaming Center, a high-tech cathedral dedicated to the art of naval warfare. They laughed, but the woman the insult was aimed at, the civilian technical advisor named Anya Sharma, did not react. She stood near the back, a ghost in a plain charcoal pantsuit, her presence so unassuming she seemed to be part of the beige architecture. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, functional bun, and her face, devoid of makeup, was a placid mask of professional neutrality. She didn't flinch. She didn't scowl. She didn't even meet Davies's smug gaze. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room, a swirling cosmos of blue and red icons representing friendly and enemy naval assets. Her hand, holding a simple datapad, was perfectly still. She made a small, precise notation with her stylus, the quiet click of plastic on glass, the only sound she contributed to the room's tense atmosphere. But when Fleet Admiral Hayes, a man whose face was a roadmap of forgotten conflicts and whose presence filled the room with an unspoken weight, saw her stance from his observation post, a flicker of something ancient and knowing crossed his eyes. He saw not a civilian consultant, but a posture of profound, patient readiness. He saw the stillness of a predator that knows the hunt is already over. He saw a calm that was not born of ignorance, but of absolute, unshakable certainty. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, that competence is its own thunderous declaration, type silence below. The silence that followed Davies's jab was a living thing, thick with unspoken questions and the palpable discomfort of the senior officers who knew better than to publicly humiliate a civilian contractor, no matter how insignificant she seemed. The Wargaming Center itself, usually a hub of excited shouts and strategic debate, felt like a vacuum. The only sound was the low, omnipresent hum of the cooling fans for the server racks that powered this multi-million-dollar digital ocean. Davies, misinterpreting the quiet as acquiescence to his superior intellect, pressed his advantage. He gestured grandly at the holographic tank, where his Blue Force carrier strike group was being systematically cornered by a numerically superior Red Force. "The simulation parameters are flawed," he declared, his voice resonating with the artificial confidence of someone who has never truly been tested. "The Red Force AI is acting with a level of coordinated aggression that is tactically illogical. It's a brute force algorithm, not a strategy. It's unwinnable by design. I've read your file, Miss Sharma. Consultant, it's a deliberately vague term. I doubt you've ever seen the inside of Combat Information Center during a live exercise, let alone understand the intricate ballet of carrier strike group logistics under duress. Your contribution here seems to be creating an impossible scenario to make us look incompetent." He was projecting, of course. His own decisions had led to this impending digital catastrophe. He had pushed his lead cruiser too far forward, failed to establish adequate anti-submarine screening, and relied on satellite intelligence that the Red Force had cleverly spoofed. He had made textbook mistakes, the kind a brash officer makes when he believes his own press clippings. Anya Sharma, however, remained a statue of serene focus. She didn't defend her programming. She didn't point out his tactical errors. She simply continued to observe the unfolding disaster on the main screen, her expression as unreadable as a heavily redacted government document. Her stillness was an act of profound defiance. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that refused to engage with his ego, a silence that communicated on a frequency he was incapable of hearing. It said that his opinion was irrelevant. It said that the truth of the situation was playing out in pixels and code, and it needed no verbal defense. To the onlookers, her lack of response was baffling. Some saw it as weakness, an inability to defend herself. Others, the more experienced commanders in the room, felt a growing unease. They had seen that kind of calm before in the eyes of bomb disposal technicians, in the steady hands of trauma surgeons, in the quiet focus of special forces operators just before a breach. It was the calm of the professional, the deep, abiding peace of someone who has mastered their craft so completely that the chaos of the moment is merely data to be processed. The tension in the room coiled tighter and tighter, a spring being wound to its breaking point, waiting for the one moment that would release all that stored energy into a single, undeniable conclusion. The crisis, when it came, was swift and brutal. The Red Force, no longer content with simply cornering Davies' fleet, launched its final, devastating assault. A wave of simulated hypersonic missiles appeared on the display, streaking towards his flagship, the USS Nimitz. Davies froze. The textbook offered no solution for this. His air wing was out of position. His Aegis cruisers were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of inbound threats, and his last-ditch CIWS defenses were being peeled away by coordinated electronic attacks. Panic began to creep into his voice. Countermeasures. Launch all countermeasures. Give me a firing solution. Evasive maneuvers. Full starboard rudder. His commands were a frantic, contradictory mess. His team, reflecting his panic, fumbled at their consoles. The simulation, a cold and impartial judge, began to register the hits. The icon for the Nimitz flashed red, then went dark. A cascade of failures followed as the command and control ship was eliminated. The Blue Force was not just losing, it was being annihilated. The exercise was seconds from a total loss, a humiliating failure in front of a fleet admiral. It was then that Admiral Hayes's voice cut through the chaos, calm and clear as a ship's bell in a quiet harbor. Lieutenant Commander Davies, you are relieved. Ms. Sharma, please assume tactical command of Blue Force. All eyes snapped to the woman in the gray suit. For the first time, she looked away from the main screen and met the Admiral's gaze. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. No hesitation, no surprise, just acceptance. She walked from the back of the room to the central command console, her steps measured and deliberate. Her movement was a study in efficiency, a fluid economy of motion that was utterly at odds with her mundane appearance. She didn't sit down at the chair Davies had just vacated. She remained standing, her feet planted shoulder-width apart, a subtle but powerful posture of absolute control. Her hands, which had been so still, came to life. They moved over the holographic interface, not with the frantic slapping of a panicked amateur, but with the precise, rhythmic grace of a concert pianist. Her fingers danced across the controls, inputting commands, rerouting data, retasking assets with a speed and confidence that was simply breathtaking. The room fell into a new kind of silence, the silence of awe. The frantic beeping of alerts and warnings from the simulation died down, replaced by the steady, methodical hum of a system being brought under perfect control. Davies, standing off to the side, watched with a slack-jawed expression of pure disbelief. What he was witnessing was not supposed to be possible. Anya Sharma did not speak a single word. She didn't need to. Her actions were her commands, her strategy unfolding on the screen in a symphony of deadly precision. She sacrificed a simulated destroyer, a move Davies had considered unthinkable, but she didn't just throw it away. She used its final electronic death throes as a massive decoy, drawing the bulk of the Red Force's attention and missile salvos. While the enemy was focused on this ghost, she executed a maneuver of such audacious brilliance that several of the senior commanders in the room audibly gasped. She used a cluster of her remaining cruisers and destroyers to create a complex, overlapping field of electronic warfare, effectively blinding the Red Force's sensors in a narrow corridor of the battlespace. Into this corridor, she sent her submarines, which had been moving silently into a flanking position while Davies was panicking. But the true genius of her move was in how she targeted the enemy. She didn't go for their capital ships. Instead, she identified and exploited a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in the Red Force's logistical chain, a single, lightly defended refueling tanker. It was a flaw she had likely coded into the simulation herself, a hidden test of battlefield awareness that Davies had completely missed. With a single, perfectly coordinated volley of torpedoes from her now-hidden submarines, the tanker was eliminated. The effect was catastrophic for the Red Force. Their advanced, fuel-hungry ships, now cut off from their lifeline and still chasing an electronic ghost, began to lose power and mobility. They became sitting ducks. In the span of 90 seconds, Anya had not only halted the complete annihilation of Blue Force, but had turned the tables so completely, so decisively, that the outcome was no longer in doubt. With the enemy blinded, disorganized, and running on fumes, she calmly vectored in her carrier air wing, which she had patiently held in reserve, and dismantled the entire enemy fleet piece by piece. The main screen, which moments before had been a sea of red alerts, flashed with a final, stark message in bold, green letters: Blue Force. Victory. The quiet hum of the servers was suddenly the loudest sound in the universe. The deafening silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, a physical weight pressing down on everyone in the room. Jaws were literally hanging open. The assembled officers, from the youngest ensign to the most grizzled captain, stared at the final tally on the screen, their minds struggling to process the tactical miracle they had just witnessed. They looked from the screen to the unassuming woman standing at the console, her hands now resting calmly at her sides. She had just performed the naval equivalent of checkmating a grandmaster in 3 moves, after starting with half her pieces already removed from the board. Lieutenant Commander Davies was pale, his face a mask of shattered arrogance. The smug certainty was gone, replaced by a raw, naked confusion. He finally found his voice, a choked whisper that was barely audible. No way. That's not possible. The parameters, the fuel consumption models, that's not possible. He wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, just muttering his disbelief into the stunned silence, his mind refusing to accept the reality of his own public, comprehensive dismantling. His entire understanding of naval warfare, built on years of academic study and theoretical knowledge, had been invalidated in less than 2 minutes by a woman he had dismissed as a bureaucratic nobody. His loud confidence had been answered and utterly annihilated by her quiet, devastating competence. The victory screen continued to glow, an unblinking, irrefutable testament to the chasm that exists between knowing the path and walking the path. Anya Sharma, for her part, simply took a small step back from the console, her work completed. She didn't smile. She didn't look around for approval. She just stood there, a paragon of professional detachment, as if she had done nothing more remarkable than file a weekly report. Her calm was no longer unnerving. It was terrifying. It was the calm of a force of nature, an entity for whom such feats of brilliance were not exceptional, but merely routine. It was the final, silent refutation of every arrogant assumption that had been made in that room. Fleet Admiral Hayes let the silence hang in the air for a full minute, allowing the weight of the moment to settle upon every person present. He let Davies stew in his own broken pride, and let the younger officers absorb the profound lesson that was unfolding before them. Then, with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who commanded armadas, he walked from his observation platform at the back of the room to the central floor. His face was like carved granite, impossible to read, but his eyes, when they locked onto Anya, held a look of profound, almost reverent respect. He completely ignored the shell-shocked Lieutenant Commander Davies, walking past him as if he were a piece of furniture. He stopped directly in front of the main holographic display, his gaze sweeping over the final strategic positions of the blue and red forces, a silent acknowledgement of the masterpiece of tactical art that had been created. He then turned his attention to the junior officer manning the central administration terminal. "Cadet," he commanded, his voice a low baritone that resonated with decades of authority. Bring up the service file for Sharma, Anya. Cross-reference with Naval Special Warfare Development Group archives. Authorization code Hayes Omega 77. A ripple of shock went through the room. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DevGRU. The unit was more commonly known by its former name, SEAL Team 6. It was the most elite, most secretive, and most lethal fighting force in the United States military. The idea that this quiet, unassuming civilian consultant could be connected to them was unthinkable. The young cadet's hands trembled slightly as he typed in the commands. The file appeared on the main screen, but it was almost entirely black, covered in thick blocks of digital redaction. Classified was stamped across it in stark red letters. Override security protocols, Cadet, the Admiral ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Use my command-level clearance, the cadet complied, and as he hit the final key, the black bars vanished. The room collectively held its breath. The information that flooded the screen was so far beyond their expectations that it felt like a physical blow. The narrator's voice, now infused with the weight of this revelation, began to tick off the credentials, each one landing like a hammer blow to the foundation of their assumptions. Name, Anya Sharma. Former rank, Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy. The highest enlisted rank possible, a position of immense respect and experience. Unit, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Task Force Gray. A designation so secret that most in the room had never even heard of it. Specialty, asymmetric warfare strategist, direct action intelligence. She wasn't just a trigger puller. She was the architect of the very missions they studied. Combat déploiement, 14. All locations listed as classified. Awards. The list scrolled on, a breathtaking testament to a career spent in the crucible of modern warfare. The Navy Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. The Silver Star, with 3 oak leaf clusters indicating 4 separate awards. The Bronze Star for valor, with 5 clusters. The Purple Heart, with 4 clusters, signifying she had been wounded in combat on at least 5 separate occasions. The list seemed endless, a litany of heroism that belonged in history books, not to the quiet woman in the gray suit standing before them. A deep, profound hush fell over the room, a silence born not of tension, but of pure, unadulterated awe. They were not in the presence of a civilian contractor. They were in the presence of a living legend, a warrior of the highest possible caliber. Admiral Hayes turned slowly, deliberately, to face Anya Sharma. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight, in a motion that was crisp, precise, and imbued with every ounce of his authority as a fleet admiral. He snapped to the most formal, most respectful salute a man of his rank could render. It was a gesture of deference rarely seen, an admiral saluting an enlisted sailor, a public acknowledgement of a warrior recognizing a peer, or perhaps even a superior, in the art of war. Master Chief, he said, his voice booming with a respect that bordered on reverence, his use of her former rank a deliberate and powerful statement. Request permission to stand down the simulation. Anya simply met his gaze and gave another one of her small, precise nods. Permission granted, Admiral. Her voice was quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of triumph. The Admiral held his salute for a moment longer before dropping it. Then, he turned his gaze upon the entire room, his eyes lingering with cold fire on the now trembling Lieutenant Commander Davies. His voice dropped, becoming a low, dangerous growl that promised consequences. Lieutenant Commander, he began, each word a perfectly polished stone of condemnation. You stand in a room dedicated to the study of naval warfare, and you question this sailor's service. You saw a gray suit, and you assumed ignorance. You saw a quiet woman, and you assumed weakness. You made the most dangerous assumption a leader can make, that appearances are reality. He took a step towards Davies, who visibly shrank back. Let me be clear for you and for everyone in this room. Master Chief Sharma didn't just do something in the Navy. She wrote the very doctrine on asymmetric naval engagement that you're so spectacularly failing to comprehend. The flawed parameter you complained about, the subtle vulnerability in the Red Force's logistics that she just exploited, that isn't a flaw in the code. It's a recreation of a real-world vulnerability she herself discovered and neutralized during Operation Silent Trident. An operation, I might add, that saved 2 of our carrier strike groups from a perfectly laid trap in the South China Sea. An operation that is so classified, your grandchildren won't be cleared to read about it. The Admiral paused, letting the full weight of his words crush Davies' spirit. You don't owe Master Chief Sharma an apology. An apology is insufficient for this level of ignorance and disrespect. You owe her your career, because men and women like her are the reason you have the luxury of playing games in this room in the first place. Class dismissed. The story of what happened in the Wargaming Center that day did not just spread, it detonated. It moved through the Naval War College like a shockwave, then leaped to the fleet, traveling on whispers and encrypted emails from Newport to Norfolk, from San Diego to Yokosuka. It became a piece of modern naval folklore, a cautionary tale passed down from senior officers to cocky ensigns. The details were embellished with each telling, but the core truth remained immutable. A quiet civilian contractor, a former Master Chief in the shadowy world of special operations, had, with 90 seconds of silent, focused brilliance, humbled a room full of officers and rewritten the definition of tactical genius. The specific maneuver she used to win the unwinnable scenario was dissected, studied, and eventually given an unofficial, but universally recognized name. The Sharma maneuver, it became a high-level, capstone test in the wargaming curriculum, a new Kobayashi Maru, designed not to be beaten, but to teach future leaders the importance of unconventional thinking and, more importantly, the catastrophic danger of underestimation. Lieutenant Commander Davies was not discharged, but his career trajectory was irrevocably altered. He received a formal letter of reprimand from the Admiral, a black mark on his record that would follow him forever. The fast track to command, the Admiral's stars he had so confidently envisioned on his own shoulders, vanished like a ship slipping over the horizon. He was humbled, broken down to his foundations, and forced to rebuild himself not as a prodigy, but as a student. Weeks later, in the quiet of the base library, he approached Anya. She was reading a dense technical manual on quantum computing, her focus as absolute as it had been at the command console. He stood before her for a long moment, his head bowed, the picture of contrition. "Master Chief," he said, his voice quiet and stripped of all its former arrogance. "I was wrong. I was arrogant. And I was ignorant. Thank you for the lesson." It was not a grand apology, but it was genuine, the quiet admission of a man who had been forced to confront the vastness of his own ignorance. Anya looked up from her book, her expression neutral. She simply nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement, not of forgiveness. Forgiveness was irrelevant. The lesson was the only thing that mattered. She had seen countless arrogant men like Davies in her career. Some learned, some did not. Her concern was not for his ego, but for the future officers he might one day lead. Her hope was that the lesson would stick, that it would make him a better leader, a wiser man. She herself deflected all praise. When officers tried to ask her about her past, about the stories behind the medals, she would politely change the subject back to the technical specifications of the simulation software. Her past was not a trophy to be displayed. It was a set of tools and experiences that she now used to forge the next generation. Her philosophy was taught not through war stories, but through the quiet mentorship she offered to any midshipman or junior officer, male or female, who was more interested in learning than in posturing. She taught them to look for patterns where others saw chaos, to find leverage in weakness, to value silence and observation over loud declarations. In the hallway outside the Wargaming Center, the framed printout of the final simulation result was mounted on the wall. It showed the impossible victory, the single refueling tanker circled in red, the elegant, deadly vectors of her counterattack. Beneath it, Admiral Hayes had ordered a simple brass plaque to be installed. It did not mention the date or the names of those involved. It simply read, "Assumptions are the enemy. Me, che, be, oa." Sharma, Ret, It became a monument, not to a single victory in a simulated battle, but to the enduring power of quiet competence. A year passed. A new class of ambitious, intelligent officers filled the lecture halls and wargaming centers of the Naval War College. The story of the Sharma maneuver was now part of the institutional curriculum. An old, grizzled captain, an instructor with salt in his veins and the hard-won wisdom of a career at sea, stood before his students in that same room. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder at the framed printout and the gleaming brass plaque. "Before we begin," he would say, "I want to tell you a story about that picture. It's the story of a day when every officer in this room, myself included, thought we knew what a warrior looked like. We thought a warrior wore a uniform, spoke with a loud voice, and carried their accomplishments on their chest for all to see. We were wrong." He would then recount the tale of the quiet civilian contractor, the woman in the gray suit who had been publicly mocked and dismissed. He would describe in vivid detail the 90 seconds of silent, perfect strategy that followed, the absolute dismantling of a superior force through intellect and precision. He told them how she had not only won an unwinnable fight, but had also taught a profound lesson to an entire generation of naval leaders. The legend was now codified, a permanent part of the Navy's oral history, a tool used to strip away the arrogance of new officers and replace it with a healthy dose of humility. The culture at the college, and by extension, the fleet, had begun a subtle but significant shift. There was a newfound respect for the civilian advisors, a greater appreciation for technical experts, and a deeper understanding that the most critical skills on a modern battlefield might not be taught at Annapolis. The focus began to move from just tactical knowledge to a more holistic understanding of strategy, logistics, and human psychology, especially the psychology of assumption. The Sharma maneuver remained the ultimate test in the simulation, and in the years since its creation, no student, no instructor, not even a team of the college's best strategists working together had managed to beat her 90-second record. It stood as a silent, digital monument to her singular genius. Her legacy was not in the medals that remained locked away in a classified file, nor in the war stories she refused to tell. It was in the actions of the officers who now thought twice before making a snap judgment based on gender, appearance, or rank. It was in the young ensign who spent more time listening to the advice of a senior enlisted sailor than trying to impress his peers. It was in the subtle, spreading understanding that true strength is quiet, that true professionalism requires no applause, and that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one who has nothing to prove to anyone but themselves. The final, philosophical truth of that day settled deep into the institution's bedrock. Legacy isn't about the glory you claim, but the standard you set. It's not about the stories you tell about yourself, but the stories others tell about the lesson you taught them. Anya Sharma's silence had been a lesson more profound and lasting than any speech or lecture. It was a silence that echoed with the weight of her experience, a silence that had humbled the arrogant, inspired the wise, and forever reminded the United States Navy that the greatest weapon it possessed was the quiet, unassuming competence of its most dedicated professionals, the ones you never see coming, the ones who have already won the battle before it has even begun. Their proof is not worn on a sleeve, but etched into the classified history of a grateful nation, a legacy of silent, selfless victory. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.